So I wanted to share a quick make with this amazing fabric that I found that was dead stock. I'm calling it my Monster Mash dress. This is going to be a 6-part series, so please follow and like if you would like to see the rest of it. In order to make this for yourself, you'll have to have a basic understanding of your measurements first. Basic measurements are neck, bust, waist, and hips. And I'm just going to measure those real quick. I am lucky that I have a body form that's in my size, and I'm just going to measure off of that as a demonstration for you, but you would want to do this off of your actual body measurements. And I do want to take a moment to talk about ease real quick. You are going to want to make sure that you put at least 1 to 2 inches of ease in this dress so that it fits well as you're moving, raising your arms, lowering your arms, sitting down, bending over, all those kinds of things. So make sure that you add 2 inches to each one of these measurements just for ease at minimum, but more if you'd like more ease on it. So here I'm going to demonstrate how to take a neck measurement. The main thing about taking measurements on your body is you're going to want to make sure things are level. Bodies are not perfectly formed, so you want to make sure that that tape measure is level. Neck is pretty easy. Then when you go to bust, I'm even noticing here on the playback that that back of that tape is a little low, and I do adjust it here a little bit, but it should have been up a lot higher. That will give you a more accurate measurement. So make sure it's level all the way around. If you have to have somebody else help you with it, that's fine. Waist is usually pretty simple because it wants to go around your waist just like a belt, so it does stay pretty level. The booty measurement, that can be a little bit different if you have a lumpy, bumpy, and sharp and pointy in places, but like mine. But you're just going to want to make sure that that tape is level. Make sure also, too, that you're not pulling it too tight. You just want to be able to get your fingers behind that. And then record those somewhere where you can keep them. I have these on my phone, but I also have them pinned up on my pin board in my Fiber Studio. Some other measurements you might want to take into consideration is your measurements from the back of your neck to your waist, and your armhole measurements, and shoulder to neck. So from basically like your collarbone to the tip of your shoulder. Those types of measurements would help you create a good body block. And like I said, I have 5 more videos coming out to make this whole series of how to make this Monster Mash dress. So please like, subscribe, follow, and you can find me anywhere on the internet at www.fibermaiden.com or FiberMaiden, all one word. So in this section, we are going to be taking those measurements and making our pattern. This is also referred to commonly as a body block. This would be a body block for a line dress. We have already added our 2 inches of ease, and we're making half of a pattern. So we're making front and we're making a back. So you're going to take those measurements, you're going to divide them in 2, and you are going to plot them out on a piece of graph paper. My great-grandmother used to do these on paper grocery bags. I've also seen them done on butcher paper. By no means do you need graph paper, but it does make it a little bit easier. You also don't need these fancy schmancy rulers. Anything with a straight edge or a curved edge can be used. I do find this one for the armhole quite useful though. And I am measuring out half of all of my measurements onto this body block because this is going to be cut on the fold with the extra inch added to it, which whenever it's flat, it will be 2 inches. One thing that I did not do is I did not make enough room for the front scooped neck. So I definitely would scoop the front pattern down a little bit more in the neck just for ease. The dress is still perfectly fine without it, but you will enjoy the dress a lot more for ease and comfort if you scoop the front down a little bit. So we are just going to trace all of this out, and once you've double checked your math and you've made sure that it all works, then you are going to cut it out. And then I basically use the back and I create the front pattern by tracing it. And then and then I have both my front and back pieces. Also here at the end, you're going to notice that I mark the pieces. I put all of my measurements on it. I put that it's front or back. I put which way the grain line should go. So I'm making all of these notes so that when I come back to this pattern a year from now or 2 years from now, that I have all the measurements and everything on it in case I need to make some adjustments. Also too, after making this, I would even add more ease to it. I added an inch on each pattern piece, which is 2 inches, but I think it would be a lot more comfortable if it was more, if I had a little bit more ease in the hips and in the bust. So I would probably even add either another inch or maybe another 2 inches to it. So, you'll see here that I'm cutting it all out, and then we are going to move on to the to cutting it out on fabric. So this is the second part of a 6-part series to make the Monster Mash dress. So like, subscribe, and follow. So as I had mentioned before, we have our 2 pattern pieces, the front and the back, and we are going to start cutting the fabric. So what I like to start out with is making sure that you have pre-washed your fabric, and it's pre-shrunk, especially if it's something like cotton, but even if it's a synthetic, and then press it out if it seems very wrinkly. This didn't seem overly wrinkly to me, and I didn't have any problems with it. Then you're going to get it all laid out flat and folded, because we're going to cut the front and then we're going to cut the back. I won't show you both of those, but we are going to cut them on the fold so that we take that half piece and make it a full front piece or a full back piece. You're going to want to make sure your fabric is flat and that your pattern is flat and that it's on the fold. I didn't take a whole lot of consideration into the pattern on the fabric. I probably could have and made the seam, the pattern match up perfectly on both sides, but I really wasn't too overly conscious of it. I just wanted to make sure that the monster faces were centered in the bottom front of the dress. And here we're using those pattern weights that we made before to hold that pattern down. And then I am using a rotary cutter to get all the way around this. It should be pretty easy, nothing complicated. I don't do a lot of annotation of my patterns with, line marks and, all different kinds of things like that. So I'm not cutting a lot of little tags out of this pattern just because I don't find it to be that helpful. And sometimes I cut into my seam allowance when I do that. So also, as mentioned before, this is part 3 of a 6-part series. So if you would like to see more of this series, please like, subscribe, and follow. You can also find me anywhere on the internet at FiberMaiden, all one word. If you have any questions, comments, tips or tricks, please put them down below. I'd be happy to see those and share those with others. And there we have it. We have all of the fabric cut out for both our front and our back, and we're ready to start sewing. So moving on to part 4 on the seaming. If you do not want to do binding on it, this is a nice option for you for the armholes and the neck holes. Before you piece the front and the back together, you can make a baby seam where you're basically, and this is also good if you don't have a serger, where you can do a 1/8 fold over and then iron it and then fold it over another 1/8, so that gives you a 1/4. Where the actual raw edge of the fabric is trapped in between, and you can do that on both armholes and the neck hole, and then you don't have to do the binding. And that is a really nice option too if you do not have a serger and you don't want to do the binding as well. So I'm just pressing it all down 1/8, and then I'm going to fold it over again 1/8 and press it down, and then I'm going to take it to the machine and sew it like this. But if you're doing binding and you have a serger, it is not necessary to do this. And you don't technically need to use the serger if you're going to do the binding, because the raw edge of the fabric is going to be hidden. But do take that into consideration whenever you're doing your cutting of your fabric as well. you do have a serger, then this is a good opportunity to do the side seam and the bottom hemline with your serger. If you do not have a serger, you could do an overlock stitch on your machine, or a zigzag stitch, or you could do a French seam where you hide the raw edges of the fabric within inside of the French seam. But if you're going to do a French seam, make sure to make adjustments to your pattern for that as well. So now we're back over at the sewing machine, and what I've done is I folded the bottom hem up a fourth and then a half, and I am hiding that serged edge within the hem of the bottom hem of the dress. I just press it with an iron, but you could also use clips or pins if that was something that you wanted to do. And we're just finishing up the seams. I'm also have already seamed the side seams after serging them. So the side seams are together, and now the bottom hem is together as well. I'm going to go ahead and start on the binding. If you're not doing binding, you could skip right to making a buttonhole and button, or a clasp or a tie, whatever closure you're choosing to make on this dress. I'm using the binding to actually make the buttonhole. So I'm going across the front neck first and cutting it off at both ends, because that's going to be covered up by the binding on the armhole. So no need to do any extra finishing here. And then I'm going to do the back neckline on the binding, same thing, cut off on both ends without any kind of finishing or anything like that. Now, I'm using a 1/4 binding here in black. You could use contrasting color if you like, or something more decorative. Maybe you could even make binding out of the fabric itself that you're using. But I was just trying to make it easy peasy for me, because I was trying to make a dress really quick. Make sure that that raw edge is fully in there, and that you're making contact on both sides with your binding and your seam line. And then once we finish the front and the back, then we will be ready to move on to the armholes. So on the armholes, I am actually starting to sew the binding about 2 inches above before it starts even touching the fabric. And that is because I'm going to use that on the back side as a loop. I'm going to loop it back around to make the buttonhole. So you can see I started it out a couple of inches before I even start getting to the fabric, and that is so I can make that that loop out of it in order to fit the button in. And I actually might have done it a couple more inches than I needed to here, because I just wanted to make sure that I had enough room to get that button in and out of the loop that I was making. So we're going on, starting on the back to make the loop for the buttonhole, and then we are working our way, sewing our way toward on the armhole on the left or the right hand side towards the front. And we're covering up the unfinished edge on the back neckline binding and the front neckline binding. And you should be able to see here shortly all of that coming together. Again, make sure that you have all of your fabric, the raw edges of your fabric within the binding, and that you're catching it both on the front and the back with the fabric in between. I didn't seem to have a problem on this, but I have had a problem with that in the past, and it can be really infuriating. If you have any tips and tricks for using binding, please feel free to drop it in the comments. As always, please like, follow, and share. I would like to see if you have made a dress using this pattern or this concept, and I'd like to know your thoughts. Now here I am finishing off the end. So I cut off a little bit away from the fabric, and it's a little fiddly, but I'm folding the binding tape back in on the front there so that it can have a finished edge. And I'm just sewing over it, folded back inside of itself there. So we're covering up, you know, the unfinished edge on the front and back, but having a finished edge on the front. Okay, so now we are creating the button loops and attaching the buttons. This is the final video for this Monster Mash dress. So I am just taking that extra binding that I did on the back, and I'm folding it over and making a little loop and then just sewing it in the seam allowance, making sure to make the loop big enough to where your button will fit through it. I'm using pretty large buttons on this one. And then just cut off the excess. There's, if you want to, you could finish it off really nicely, but at this point I was just ready to finish my dress. So I just folded over the loop and sewed it a couple of times just to make sure that it's really secure. And then what I am doing is hand sewing the button on. And I prefer to hand sew the button on. I could have done it with the machine. I use typically upholstery thread to put buttons on. And I have a specific way that I was taught how to do it, where you go through it multiple times and then you wrap the thread around it on the back side. And I find that whenever I do this, that my buttons have more durability for use. I can be pretty hard on my clothes. My kids and my husband can certainly be very hard on their clothes as well. And buttons is typically something that whenever I've done with the machine, I've not had a whole lot of success with. So I prefer to hand do it. Love to know your opinion on that. But yeah. So sewing on both of the buttons, and then we're pretty much done. Like, the dress is ready to wear. Please let me know what you think of the project, and I would love to have you follow me on the internet anywhere at FiberMaiden, all one word, or at FiberMaiden.com. And I hope that you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.